We're going to get started in just a second. State Senator Charles Perry is a lifelong West Texan and a practicing CPA from Lubbock. He was elected to the Texas Senate in 2014 after serving 2 terms in the Texas House of Representatives. Senator Perry currently chairs the Senate Committee on Water, Ag, and Rural Affairs and is vice chair of the Human Health and Services Committee. He also sits on the Senate Committees for Education, Finance, Redistricting, and Transportation, and he co-chairs the State Water Implementation Fund for Texas. Governor Abbott appointed him to the Southwestern States Water Commission and the Western States Water Council. Senator Perry graduated from Sweetwater High School and earned his Bachelor of Business Administration in Accounting and Management Information Systems from Texas Tech University. Please join me in welcoming Senator Charles Perry.
Well, it's good to be here. It's good to be here in person, for sure. I don't know if this is the first time since COVID, but it's good to be back out. It's good to be back out in the district. I apologize for being a little bit late. A CPA's world and during mid-February is sometimes unpredictable as far as schedules go. So I got hung up at the office a little longer than expected, but I'm here now and appreciate Brooke from Water Development Board doing her thing and talking to you guys about what they've been doing. I'll try to tie into that. I'll start with kind of the 87th in review and then what I see on the horizon, and I think some things regarding the federal application as it regards to how it impacts water, specifically in Texas water. So the 87th in review was one of those sessions where I spent most of my time as water chair killing bills. There were multiple attempts, some disguised, some unintended, and some deliberate, that their sole purpose was to create a taking, basically taking a water right or a water source away from a landowner without compensation. I'm not sure that many of them were as intended, but it had state backing on a couple levels of some of those initiatives. So I think I killed about 4 bills that were a direct assault, indirectly or directly, whether known or unknown, at the end of the day, against private landowners and their water rights associated with that. You heard earlier today that we've completed our 2022 state water plan, which predicts a population of 51.5 million by 270, with 6.8 million estimated acre feet short in order to meet that supply. Water plan's reviewed every 5 years. You know, the good news is Texas has a water plan. Probably leads the country in trying to plan for water into the future. The bad news is, if there is a bad news component to it, is it a realistic water plan? And I ask that question everywhere I go. I've been asking that question for over 4 sessions now, that we have a water plan as good as it is in predicting in what we expect to need and how we will get there. We have relied, I believe, personally, at least, on provisions of that plan that will not be met. Therefore, the need will not be met, and that we're not being honest about the water plan itself. The plan includes 23 new reservoirs. It takes over 20 years for a reservoir just to be permitted or approved. To put that in question, since the first modern state water plan was released in 2000s, only 6 reservoirs have been permitted, and 3 of those have not been started as of yet. So realistically, the question has to be asked is, can we truly depend on 23 new major reservoirs to meet the goals of a state water plan by 2070? And I think if we're honest with ourselves, that's probably not the case. Inside the state water plan, as it's relevant to our area of the world, 31% of the strategies involved in the state water plan are ag conservation. It's the top strategy in the state water plan. Now, not to say that conservation is not important, but I think if you're in the agriculture industry, you have to take note as what that is code for. Code for is ag are the biggest users of water, and we have to find a way to circumvent their use of that water, because municipals will play a larger role in that conversation going forward. So you need to recognize I think the times that we're in, and as these laws that are being proposed at the legislature try to get access to water, groundwater specifically, without compensation, that it's now more than ever that you as an industry group, all fronts, be it cattle, corn, cotton, it doesn't matter what you grow or what aspect you're involved in as a producer, your water and your groundwater rights specifically in the state of Texas are on a radar that they've never been, largely due to the fact that we are urbanizing as a state faster than we have ever have. Our urban populations are looking for more water sources and really don't have an appreciation or understanding of basic private landowner rights. The good news is with every challenge comes opportunity for innovation, an opportunity to do things better, more efficiently when it comes to water, labor, and other things, as this industry has always shown a resilience in being able to do. I was sitting in a investment seminar yesterday talking about outlook in the economy, talking to an economist was there predicting and some investment opportunities. Agriculture was the largest share of the commodities bucket for opportunities to invest during a inflationary period yesterday. During that conversation, they threw up a slide that in California there was a vertical farm, 2-acre footprint indoors under the hydroponic label that was growing enough lettuce or more lettuce than 700 acres to the south before that farm was put in place. So I think you'll see over the next 20 years what we're growing, and how we're doing it, because that is one technology that utilizes water very efficiently, chemicals very efficiently, and actually can outproduce in multiple crops per year rather than traditional farming. Does that work on our cotton crop? Probably not. But I think you're going to start seeing movement towards that, and I think by necessity, the industry will have to respond in ways like that to continue the food, fiber, and things that we expect from our agriculture producers. But with every challenge comes opportunity, and I think that this industry leads the way in opportunity taking. The majority of the water in the state is allocated and in demand. It's important to find new sources of water. And anybody that's paid attention to my tenure in the state legislature as water chairman, I've always talked about developing water supplies, future water supplies. What are the untapped water supply opportunities in the state that we have? Specifically, we know we get rain. Good Lord gives us what he thinks we need, and we take the best care of that as we can, but we're about 95% plus dependent on what falls from the sky and stays in that closed loop. I have spent the last several years in discussion with stakeholders regarding the beneficial uses of produced water, oil and gas production. For every barrel of oil, on average, there's 6 barrels of water that comes up with it. I've also talked about marine desal, and we put legislation in place where marine desal can go forward off the coast in the Gulf, and we continue to explore those opportunities and have opportunities in some plants on a small scale doing that. San Antonio Inland has done that. Obviously, El Paso has been a leader in desal for years. So we really don't have a lot of opportunities for new supply development other than brackish, marine, and now produced water. So according to the experts in the oil and gas industry, specifically to the Permian Basin, since 2009 to 2017, there were 25 million acre-feet of excess produced water from the Delaware and Midland basins out of the oil and gas production. 25 million acre-feet that has been injected back into the saltwater areas or has evaporated, or of a small percentage of late, the last few years, the industry has found ways to reuse it in the fracking to prohibit use or discourage use in the fresh market supplies. I authored Senate Bill 601 specifically to address the produced water opportunities that exist. Specifically, the last 10 years that I've talked about water, the conversation regarding desaling, other processes such as that is it costs too much and technology's not there and we don't want to pursue it. The truth of the matter is nobody has that answer. When I'd ask them what that cost is and what that cost recovery could look like, and is it truly not available in technology, everybody just kind of throw up their hands and leave the room. Senate Bill 601 has pushed the envelope to the top, that when we go back As of September 1st of 22, we will have a report in hand that has met with stakeholder groups and interested groups from environmentalists all up and down as to whether produced water can be a viable beneficial use other than just injecting it or evaporating it or fracking reuse. That report is due again on September 1st, 22. Texas Tech is kind of air traffic controller of those conversations and those stakeholder groups. Industry, oil and gas specifically, has been pretty good stewards of finding ways to reuse that water. I've been on 2 or 3 fields where they have massive reuse pits and are able to kind of gin some of the water that they once were having to saltwater inject. But out of that study, specifically what we hope to get is, one, this technology exists that can actually clean up the dirtiest of the dirtiest water out of produced water fields and make it for other beneficial use, specifically from potable all the way back to ag or other use. So one, does technology exist? And I think the answer to that will be unequivocally yes, the technology exists. It's actually been done in other states and other places around the world. So I think the technology is out there. Secondly, if we can do it, can we do it on a scalable and distributable basis? Can we actually put it back into some supply component, or can we make it fit into the mold of where it makes the most efficient use of it to be distributed? And thirdly, how much and how do we recover the cost of doing that? And so that report's pretty comprehensive. It deals with some economics, it deals with technology, it deals with the opportunity. It will only work in the Permian Basin. You've got to have a large feedstock of produced water to justify the investment needed to do it. Now, politics is 99% timing. Politics can be better for this discussion because the oil and gas industry, because of seismic activity regarding saltwater injection wells over the years and other environmental concerns that have been raised out of that, they are very interested and very excited about the opportunity of maybe finding a use of produced water that could relieve pressure on freshwater sources today, maybe an agricultural beneficial use, or hopefully get it to a potable standard. So that's Senate Bill 601. That was the biggest water legislation passed out of our session. Again, I'll go back to, we killed more stuff this session than we ever have, and that was probably the highlight of the session. But as far as water legislation going forward, that was it. You know, agriculture producers are the ultimate stewards of water. A large part of that 31% in the plan will take care of itself on sheer economics. When you start having to drill 600-foot wells, the economics don't work out. So it will self-regulate on some level. But a lot of people ask me, what will 31% look like in a 2070 plan? And I said, well, it really depends on if you're sitting on the center of the cone of depression or on the edge, right? The sense of urgency is how far do you have to drill to get the water? So this 31%, I don't want people to take hold of that and say, we've got a plan and 31% of it's going to impact us, because it really could impact you a lot quicker, depending on where you're setting on that aquifer basin. It could impact you a lot quicker depending on municipals being able to drill massive wells on small acreages and not compensating you for the underground that it's pulling from. Those are all real issues facing the economy and the industry groups that we depend on in Texas. From a budget standpoint, largest exporting state in the country, has been for 15 plus years. From an oil and gas and from an ag producer's perspective, it is real issues that need to be addressed today. The Senate Bill 601 is meeting in subcommittees. They've been organized. They've been meeting for probably in earnest a couple of good months now. I'm supposed to have an update on what those guys next couple of weeks. I'm looking forward to what that hopefully can produce and maybe actually provide a brand new, untapped water source that's thousands of feet deep that we had not been able to use before. Specifically, some of the major concerns around Senate Bill 601 is safety of water supply. Clearly, we will not pollute an existing freshwater supply while trying to create a new water source. I'm not going to do that. Y'all aren't going to let me do that. Y'all don't want me to do that. It's amazing to me some of the arguments that come out of the woodwork when you start having these conversations. We don't have the luxury of not having these conversations, and we're smart enough in a country with the wealth that we have to be able to develop water to meet the needs of the country, not only just this area, but in this state, but the country. We're surrounded by 2 seas and a South Gulf. There's no excuse that the wealth in this country, we shouldn't be having these conversations on a global scale to get our water sources. On the western side of the Rockies, clearly, they should be having these conversations today, and the United States should be having these conversations on a big level. So there's more areas of future water supply opportunities. Winter Storm Uri. Did anybody in here know that we actually named winter storms like we do hurricanes? I did not realize that, but we named Winter Storm Uri February of 20. It had a major impact on the session in general and some things that we were called to do and explore and some of the exposure it created, but specifically to a water supply opportunity. After we had that event, everybody was running around talking about giving municipal water supplies and other places generators. We got to get a generator out there. Our water supply was shut down. We had 16 million people on boiled water notices at one point in time in the state. It really wasn't as much the power associated with those municipals, but it was the fact that they've got leaky infrastructure. And they had leaky infrastructure before Winter Storm Uri. And as an elected official, the last thing you want to come out and tell people is, we've got to raise your water and sewer rates $2. We got to raise your property taxes because we have 50, 60-year-old pipes in the ground that leak water. So for years and years and years, deferred maintenance has went its way. And now we are estimating to lose close to, I believe, 13% of the water in our daily water supply systems in this state to leaky pipes. So if we really want to get serious about water supply and water conservation, and the state really wants to prevent another Winter Storm Uri impact regarding water pressure and having 16 million people on water notices, we should deal with the root of the problem, and it was the fact that we lost pressurization in large part to leaky pipes. So I'm having the conversation with the Light Gov and the Speaker and the Governor over the next few weeks once we get past primary March 1st, that if we're serious about addressing some of the impacts of Uri, we need to fix our infrastructure. And what that looks like is either the local elected officials are going to have to come and say, we need to actually raise your money to go out here and fix these systems. Water's never been priced right, never been appreciated. Or I think there is a role, and we have done it in the past for other major infrastructure initiatives, and the cash, state's flush with cash, the country's flush with cash, individuals are flush with cash because the feds have printed more cash than we can ever spend. The impacts of it are showing up. Just to be clear on inflation, it's not what you're spending on it that's creating the inflation problem. It's the fact that we overprinted a supply of money. That's the direct root of inflation. That's a side note, and I digress. But specifically, we should be able to find a plan that partners with large water systems and small water systems around the state that provides no interest, low interest, our possible grant sources for a match to locals to address, first of all, the Winter Storm Uri effect, but more importantly, a water supply component. 143 billion gallons of estimated fresh water is lost to the ground through leaky pipes on an annual basis. Now, that doesn't solve our water problems, but it starts moving towards that umbrella, and it's things we should do anyway, right? So I am having those conversations of what an infrastructure package could look like in Texas for municipals across the board to be able to access it. Actually, 5 large systems service about 85% of the population. And then the 15% is rural supply systems scattered out through the rural communities. And they're small dollars that get big impacts, but if we should be able to find the money to provide that relief, and that's my conversation going forward with where do we go from here on Senate Bill 3, which requires that. With 13.4% is what the Water Development Board estimates is lost through our water supply in leaky pipes. I can build as many generators or hook as many of them as I want. I'm just pushing water through leaky pipes faster. So don't buy into that's all that we needed to do and knew we'd fix. I guess one of the biggest concerns and the ones that probably go unnoticed and nobody wants to pay attention to it because it's boring, it's not sexy, it's politics, it's not fun. But our federal overreach round 2 has begun in earnest. It is alive and well. It is being pitched under terms of Department of Environmental Protection Association. It's picked under Department of Interior. It's just a whole host of things coming out of the federal government. So the Obama administrators introduced the term WOTUS, effectively didn't introduce the term, but went after redefining WOTUS and ultimately was set back through the court systems. The current administration, through the U.S. Army Corps and EPA, have delivered on the promise to revise the definition of WOTUS, or the waters of the U.S. And you ask why that's important to the feds to have control over tributaries and navigable waters and connected tributaries. You know, for civilization, for centuries, civilization and governments all over the world and over time have always built cities over water sources. You go to Tel Aviv. Tel is a city over the water. Tel in Israel is regulated. Here's a water source. And they're layered. Cities are layered on how they evolved. But it was always on or near a water source. Governments figured out long ago that if you can control the water, you can control the people. That's true today. We saw it play out during the Obama era, where in Southern California during droughts, conveniently enough, red districts or red agriculture producers were cut off and blues had water. So if you think water's not a political tool or can be used in that way, you're kidding yourself. This administration, currently, under Joe Biden's administration, has applied a new definition of WOTUS that will apply to some intermittent streams, ponds that farmers and ranchers rely on for their livelihood. The rule also discredits any work that's been done at protecting our water system by saying the states have not done enough to adhere to the Clean Water Act. I will tell you, Brooke and crew from Water Development Board, TCEQ, are some of the finest people and agencies. As much as sometimes we get cross with their initiatives, they have a heart for what's going on, but they do a very good job of making sure Texas water is clean and hopefully becoming a data resource to make sure we have water going forward. There was a deadline for comment on the first draft definition, which was February 7th. I did submit comments and copied all of our federal partners on that: Cruz, Cornyn, Jackson, Arrington, Pfluger out of San Angelo area. So they have all been made aware of it if they were not aware of what was going on in the conversation, so hopefully they can get engaged. Federal government used their overreach to claim that these water features, private property owners would be forced to endure a cumbersome process. If they're successful in this initiative, you will now be permitting what is already yours on your property. You will now be subject to regulations and visits if people choose to, because the government, the feds government, will control how you use those ponds and those tributaries and those navigable waters connected to it. More freedom has been lost by the submission to regulation and threats from the same than by gun and cannon over the life of this nation. You need to wake up. You need to get engaged. You need to be paying attention at state, at the local, at the federal level. But they're truly, truly messing with things that on the long term give them control. On the short term, make your life miserable and make it cost prohibitive to even be in an agriculture segment. Central point in the previous session is an inherent conflict between groundwaters and groundwater management. I always stand on the side of private landowners. I always stand on the side of private property. That is the one thing that makes us unique as a country. Very few other countries give rights to their citizens to own, develop, and produce wealth, and that's by virtue of owning something of value. That said, groundwater districts that manage over those water resources in most parts of the state are under attack at the legislative level. I'm not an anti-water district person. I have tried to build partnerships and coalitions with water districts and landowners because that coalition will be the only coalition that can mount an offensive strategy, not a defensive one, as this state goes blue from the urban perspective. And those folks don't have an appreciation what you do. And they really don't care that your water is your water. So I'm telling you guys, water districts are not bad. I'm telling you guys, as landowners, somewhere in this mix, you got to find a way to work together to the point that you extend what we have. That's the purpose, right? That's the goal. But more importantly, you're united when it comes out as an all-out assault from the legislature that's currently changing, just sheer population alone, that doesn't understand our world out here. The proposed water definition includes a vague reference to water nexus. That's been the term that's been introduced before, which could lead into groundwater because it is so vague. And they are intent on leading into a groundwater conversation. That conversation was principal at the legislative level about groundwater connection to surface water. They're trying to make the connection. And I'm pretty sure somewhere down the road there always is. That groundwater didn't just create itself. But once that connection's established, then it gives state control, Texas state control over the groundwater, because Texas is over the control and the permitting and the delegation of who owns the surface water. You got to see it where it's going. So if you're really not too concerned that this is happening, or you don't think that I'm telling you the truth, in the fall of 2020, EPA sent a letter to TCEQ telling the agency that the administration would be reviewing their delegated authority over marine desal permitting. TCEQ has had that authority since the late 1990s. The agency received a permit application for the desal plant scheduled to go into construction. They were just about ready to break ground. That permit was granted back in 2018 to Corpus Christi. In the fall of now the federal administration is terminating the waiver for draft permits and has requested documents related to those permittings. Basically, they pulled the permits on the Corpus Christi marine desal plant under Department of Interior and some environmental concerns. That permit's been existed since 18. All the engineering, all the paperwork, all the money on the soft costs have been spent. Marine desal is an answer to Texas water problems in the right areas to eliminate use of fresh water from other sources for those municipals that live on the coast. This administration has stepped in with the big foot of the federal government and put it on the neck of marine desal permitting in Texas as of the fall of 2020. So that's kind of the water world in a nutshell. I'll tell you where we're at in the legislature. We had 4 sessions. We had a regular and 3 specials. It ended up being a pretty productive session by all counts. We had spent some money. We spent $3 billion of Texas taxpayer dollars on the border security. So what's 2023 looking like from my perspective? You can't turn on the news that you're not hearing how great Texas economy is doing, and that is true. We are fortunate to live in a state that is pro-business, as little as regulatory environment as we need, and give people opportunity to succeed. That said, we are going to have excess revenues next session, partly because of the large federal dollars that has kind of backlogged purchasing, and it's creating sales tax revenues and things that are a little bit of an anomaly to where we should be. We're going to come into 23 with potentially $20 billion more than what we had in coming out of 2021. That was the largest budget session we've ever had. It's a $260 billion plus budget, plus highway funds of $30 billion outside, $300 billion enterprise. Here's the problem. We're going to need every penny of that. Coming into Texas, we have close to $6 billion of cost for 300,000 new kids in public education due to the border, open borders. They're in our public school systems. We got to educate them. $6 billion of that money spent. We got another $12 billion fight going on with the current administration over health care. We may or may not win that battle. It's in the court systems today. So there's $18 billion right there of additional costs that we did not have in our budget, nor did we anticipate when we did our budget, already upon us in 2023. I could talk a lot about legislative, and I know I'm keeping you guys from lunch. So I'll close it up and finish up, and I'll be glad to take questions offline, or I'd take them now, but I know people are needing to get to food, and I've partly because we're late. But so here's my perspective as Charles Perry, Senator Perry, individual, where we're at. I believe water is the most important issue of the day and the least one being talked about. There's not a sense of urgency to develop new sources nationally, statewide, or other. It's not sexy, it's long-term, it's expensive. We don't have the right conversation ongoing around water, water development, and water supply. Last time I checked, I can walk a lot of places if oil and gas industry can't produce. I go about 3 days, my kidneys start shutting down, and I die pretty quickly after that. You got to have water to live. So I can't think of anything more important on a practical policy elected official conversation that we're not having. I'm about the sole voice of advocating for conversations on we need to start developing water supply today for tomorrow's generation. John found a lantern in his garage, and he rubbed it. Genie appeared. Genie said, I'll give you 3 wishes. John said, well, I want to be a billionaire. That's wish number 1. Genie said, it's done. Second wish, he said, well, I hate to fly, and I really want to see the Hawaiian Islands. Can you build me a road to the Hawaiian Islands, and can you connect them with a highway? Genie said, man, that's a tough one. What's your third one before I do that one? I'll think about that. Well, I've been divorced 3 times. I don't have the secret to keeping a woman happy. I don't know how to love and nurture them into a relationship. Can you give me the secret to managing a relationship with a woman? Genie scratched his head and pondered for a little bit, and he said, you know what? He said, do you want 4 lanes or 5 lanes on that highway? The moral of that story is we have raised 2 generations of people, moving into our third, that government has become the genie in the bottle, that everything can be solved if just government will come and help us. COVID showed a whole lot of things, that people need to take heed to, especially from a Christian flavor, that they're a little bit concerned where their eternity is because they were faced with mortality potentially early on in the COVID discussion that like they'd never had. So we have that issue going on. But more often than not, government's like that genie in the bottle, and it needs to be kept there. We've given way too much authority over. We've given way too much liberty. We've allowed too many unilateral decisions being made on our behalf in the name of public safety and health the last 2 years. It's a very big reveal for me. So if I really had to put it all in a nutshell as the biggest issue facing this country, this state, and the people that live in it, it's the worship of little g instead of big G. We have started where we look to government, little g, for all of our concerns and our dependence and everything that we think we need, to the detriment of remembering who created everything we need. So on a moral level, I'm going to talk about water every day from a policy perspective, but this country needs to get right in so many different ways on so many different levels, because water is the least of our concerns for the longevity of a republic constitution that was grounded in Judeo-Christian values. So with that, it's not water, but it is water, right? It is water. It's living water, and we need to be a part of that. We've sat on the sidelines too long. We've elected people where the first question is, are you going to raise my taxes, or do you like schools, or can you fix my health care, instead of who do you serve? As for me, I'm pretty clear on that. Where that gets me politically, I can't worry about it. But I think we need to have an honest assessment of where we're sitting in our country, or that's going to be the issue of the day that we can't overcome. With that, I'll be glad to take questions. I know that lunch is served, but I don't want to ever leave a room where people may have questions. If you don't want to ask them publicly, I'll hang around here. I've got nowhere to be. I think I'm preaching at 3 to a no-till farmer group. You're more than welcome to come. It ought to be fun, but we're going to have a good time there. I was invited to do that, and I never miss an opportunity. So anybody got anything that they are in dire need of knowing what I think? If you want to know what I think, you really need to pick another entertainment source. I appreciate you guys, and thank you, and I apologize again for being late.